My name is Ignacio Gaunaurd. Thank you, Debbie, for thank you so much for inviting me to present today to ACAPT. It's an honor to do this. It's an honor to share kind of like our experiences using mobile technology. And so my goal today is kind of give you all an idea of how we've implemented this type of technology with our research and kind of the trials and tribulations of doing this and like the successes and how collaboration has been key to our success as a team in using this type of technology in rehab practice and in research. This is my disclaimer. I have to put this up, but yeah, I'm not going to say it. I'm just putting it up there. All right. So there's about 5 projects that that funded a lot of the work that I'll be talking about today. So they're a cornucopia of DoD, VA programming, as well as Wallace Culture Center awards, as well as funding from the Department of Defense. So I think everyone loves an origin story, right? Whether you're a Marvel person or a DC person, and everyone likes to hear where something originated from, right? So the FORE Center, which stands for the Functional Outcomes Research and Evaluation Center, was actually established in the Miami VA Veterans Affairs Medical Center in downtown Miami in 2005. It was actually funded through the work of Dr. Gailey. Dr. Robert Gailey is foremost expert in amputee rehabilitation, arguably in the world. He's at UM. He's been there for many years. He received some VA funding to establish this center with several goals. Okay, so one of the primary goals was to develop robust, valid, and reliable outcome measures, whether it's performance-based or patient-reported outcome measures. Primarily, its funding was to develop a exercise prescription-based amputee rehabilitation program. We call it EBAR, and as well as to assess like the functionality and usability and benefits of different prosthetic components, whether it's different prosthetic feet or different prosthetic knees. So about 5 to 6 years after forming or establishing the FORE Center at the Miami VA, we had an opportunity at the University of Miami to move our center at the VA to UM for a unique partnership / collaboration. That's kind of like where that little arrow shows you. And I think like it's, I think one of the mission statements of ACAPT is really like, I guess, discussing and sharing how to build different research relationships, research collaborations. And I think this is like kind of like our story is a really nice example of the success of collaborating with different researchers and different clinicians and different professionals in our field. So that picture down there, I love. This is my favorite picture we've taken as a team. It was actually, we were invited to do a live demonstration of our reload system, which I'll talk about today, at the Smithsonian Museum of American History back in 2017. And that picture is, we have like PhD students at the time who were studying. We had veteran clinicians who are experts in their field. We have programmers and engineers in that picture, as well as our, one of our participants in our study who's a lower limb amputee. But it's collaboration is what's made us a successful center, and it's made our research successful as well. So, so that collaboration has helped us develop a sensor system called, actually there's 2 names for the sensor system. It's Reload or Cane Sense. I think ideally, when you develop anything, I think your goal is for it to work well with the population that you intend to use it with, but also to you can translate it to another population. That'll be even better, because then it's adoption into clinical care, into research is more feasible if it's something that can be used with multiple populations. So we actually have one sensor system, but we'll use it for different purposes. We have Reload, which which I'll discuss first, and we have cane sense. And they're kind of like this picture here is a picture of I-95 and the Turnpike in Florida, where that's the portion where they're kind of running parallel. And that's kind of what we've done in the last 12 years. We've developed both of these. We've developed this sensor system for different populations in parallel to each other. And it's been excellent, and it's been extremely fruitful, and I'll be sharing some of that results with you. So our collaboration is a unique one. So it's we had an opportunity to collaborate with the Frost School of Music here at the University of Miami. Is one of the top 3 music programs in the United States. They have a music engineering program that's fantastic. And we were able to, our Department of Physical Therapy here at the University of Miami, we were able to develop and work with them in developing our sensor system. And this is like a beautiful quote that we have here from our article that was published many years ago. It's like, it's a computer, it's a phone, it's a musical instrument. And by the way, you can talk to your knee on it. So like all of us on a daily basis, I'm sure we always have our earbuds in our ears, always listening to music, walking around, whether it's at work or exercise or whatnot, right? So I go, wouldn't it be ideal if we use that kind of technology that's currently available to us to help promote or augment the physical therapy of patients, in our case, people with lower limb loss at home? And can we use music cues and verbal cues to help get them to walk better, to walk more symmetrical while they're at home? So music, working with music engineering in the Frost School of Music, was kind of the driver of RELOAD, which is stands for Rehabilitative Lower Limb Orthopedic Assistive Device. And music is a driver to provide corrective gait cues. And we've developed a system that provides both verbal and music distortion cues to a person. The verbal cues are very similar to the same cues that you would tell your patient how to remind them how to, whether it's to put more weight through their prosthesis, you may hear squeeze your buttocks, or to I guess translate their pelvis forward. So it's lead with your hip, or to roll over their prosthetic foot so they can take a longer step with their sound limb, thus spending more time in their prosthetic limb. That would be like roll over your toe. So these cues are typical cues that people with lower limb loss will hear from their physical therapist during prosthetic gait training or physical therapy rehabilitation. So all we've done is we've put those cues in their head via using, like in this case, there's an iPad and sensors that they put on their legs and earbuds. So they'll go for a walk, and within 30 steps, the sensor system and the iPad is all assessing how they're moving. And depending on how they're moving, they'll hear a cue to cue them how to correct the way they're walking if they're walking with a specific gait deviation. And we call it putting a physical therapist in their pocket, or a PT in their pocket. And the goal is, again, to augment their rehab, maximize prosthetic use, promote walking symmetry, and decrease gait deviations. We know all those things help to combat secondary comorbidities that happen long-term for patients who are lower limb prosthesis users. So if music is the driver, the inertial measurement units are kind of like the engine. Inertial measurement units, we have IMUs in all our phones, in our smart watches. An IMU is just, it's a sensor that has different types of sensors within it. May have the accelerometer, may have a gyroscope. Accelerometer assesses speed, gyroscope assesses angular velocity, is kind of like your goniometer, in multiple planes of motion. And then you have the magnetometer, which assesses like your position where you are in space. And when you put all these things together on multiple segments of the body, in our case, we're interested in the lower limbs. So we put sensors on knee sleeves, like that picture shows right there. They can put one knee sleeve on their non-prosthetic limb, on their sound limb, or their intact limb. And on their prosthetic limb, we can attach the sensors to their socket, to their pylon, or if they have like an external cover, they can put the sleeve on their prosthetic limb as well. So they go for a walk with RELOAD at home, okay? And like I said, within 30 steps, the sensors are all reading all these gait metrics that are being captured with the sensors. It's filtered to an iPad, and then we're using machine learning classification to make sense of all those signals with the intention that those that their most prominent gait deviation that they're showing when they're walking, they'll hear a cue to correct that gait deviation, whether it's a verbal cue, like whether it's squeeze your buttocks, roll over your toe, lead with your hip, or these are good steps, or they'll hear a music distortion that is specific towards a gait deviation that they're presenting with. This is the one unfortunate thing with Zoom. I was trying to, I had a video, I was in a show, and I was testing it out today. It didn't work, but it kind of shows our music distortion in real time and how it works. But it's really neat. It works really well. And I'll tell you, like the only way this system works well is if we have the sensors are collecting data accurately, and then we have a system like the machine learning classifier, which is kind of like the brain of the system, to make sense of the data that's being collected through the sensors. In our case, it's temporal spatial gait metrics that we're assessing, whether it's stance time, step length, knee flexion, things of that nature. So the machine learning classifiers is the brain that allows us to make sense of the data so that it can identify gait deviations and provide a cue to correct gait deviations in real time at home when the patients are using this to walk in their community. But in order to get there, there's a lot of steps. And one first thing we had to do was really establish specific sensor metrics for these IMUs so that they can so they can make sense of that data that's being collected. So we had to extract from the gyroscope, gyroscope data, these different various metrics that were important to being able to classify the way the amputees are walking. And these are our publications, and these are, like I said prior, single limb stance, step limb support time, step length, stride length, gait velocity, things of that nature that we collect that feed into the machine learning classifier. So we collect this information, but then you also have to kind of like tag it or provide context to that meaningful data. So what we did was we collected videos on well over 70 lower limb amputees. Now it's actually 170 lower limb amputees, thanks to Dr. Crystal's work at the Amputee Coalition meeting. And we were able to, we take these videos, and then we, at the same time, we're collecting data, walking data while the people are walking, while we're videoing them walk. And we get together afterwards, and as a team, we put together like a consensus of how, what gait deviations each person was presenting with while they were walking at the AC. And we pretty much tag their gait data, the temporal spatial metrics, with the context of what gait deviations they were presenting with at the time, so that the machine learning classifier can identify what gait deviations, so they can identify what gait deviations are actually occurring at the time of walking, using both this type of qualitative data as well as the sensor metric data. And we put it together in we use a machine learning classifier system. We use a boosted tree decision-making system where in a very simple way, it'll say, like, if you present with this, this, and this, you have this type of gait deviation. And our accuracy was extremely high in identifying the presence of gait deviations, anywhere from 92 to 100%, depending on the gait deviation that we were, depending on the 4 gait deviations that we were assessing. Yeah, 4. So it's a very accurate system. So now that we have a system that's accurate, now it was time to actually see if it worked. So we deployed this to 2 locations in the Miami VA and Walter Reed National National Military Medical Center, and we deployed this system to both service members and veterans with lower limb loss. And the one thing that I didn't mention, but I'm going to mention now, is not only were we giving the system to our patients, but they were taking home with them like an iPad with the sensor sleeves, earbuds and some simple exercise equipment. The system itself also recommends exercises that they can do right after they walk that specifically addresses the most prominent gait deviation that they presented with at the time of walking. So if they presented with decreased balance, so that was the most prominent gait deviation that they were presenting with during their home walk, they would get 2 exercises that directly addressed those gait deviations through stool stepping and ball rolls, which address like single limb balance and postural stability and trunk control and things of that nature. So that exercise prescription program was actually based on that original funding that we received through the VA in 2005. Our EBAR project was published, or our EBAR program was published and PTJ in 2020. So if you're interested in learning about how we've developed exercise-based prescription evidence-based amputee rehabilitation programs, please check it out. And then if you're also wondering, okay, how is a clinician using this data? Well, there was a web portal that allowed the clinicians to go in and track. Not only it allowed them to collect and see how they're changing in their outcome measure data collections that they would conduct in the clinic. So that first little box up there says AMP results, is amputee mobility predictor. That's a common outcome measure that's administered to lower limb amputees. It assesses their current mobility. It helps with prosthetic prescription. And as you can see, this person had an improvement over a 2-month period of 4 points. That hits a minimal threshold. That's greater than a minimal detectable change. So that means that person had a change that was not result to error because of the intervention. And then you can see in the other boxes below, you can see how long we can see how much they walked, what their duration was, their cadence, what their prominent gait deviation was. You can see what exercises were prescribed and what they did. And then you can also see we asked them to put in voluntarily what activities they were doing at home, in addition to the home walks and the exercises that they were doing for our program. So in general, we had like really excellent results. Again, we published this in Military Medicine in 2020. Overall, as you can see here, like typically patients who were part of this program, the mean home walks they performed were about 2 to 3 per week, about 15 minutes per walk. And they exercised about 3 times per week, which was actually about what we were asking them to do. We wanted them to walk or perform exercise at least 2 to 3 times a week during this program. And then also what's really important is when you develop this type of technology, right? Like we want to see if, what they feel, how they felt about using the system. And 17 participants anonymously completed a survey, and they found that the majority of them found that they would use the system again for home rehab. They felt the auditory feedback was helpful to them, that it was easy to take on and put on the sleeves. If you think about the population we're dealing with here, with the VA, the majority of the patients in the VA, they have diabetes, peripheral vascular disease. It's difficult for them to put things on and take things off. So it's like this system wasn't hard for them to take on, to don and off, and charging the sensors and the system was relatively easy for them. And these were some of the comments that they gave us at the end, like the feedback helped me create new habits, enabling me to walk longer distances with less fatigue. I liked hearing the commands as a nudge to do something you're not doing and need to do. It helped remind me to focus on my walk, what to do to make it better. It made me more mindful of my gait, and it reminded me to fire my muscles. So again, like I think we accomplished the goal of putting a PT in their pocket at home. And we've actually, we received additional funding to expand this to 4 other VA facilities, if I'm not mistaken. And this will go through this year and next year. And the goal is to recruit well over 300 veterans and service members with lower limb loss. We've shrunk the system. They hated the iPads. It was too bulky. We got them all iTouches now. The system is really streamlined. We've included a number of other outcome measures that the clinicians can use to make it easier for them to document and to do outcome measures in the clinic, and as well as use both verbal and music distortion feedback for patients in the study. So, so that's reload for you. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about cane sense. So cane sense, kind of like the impetus of cane sense came from my dissertation work, helped develop a performance-based outcome measure that assess high-level mobility for service members and veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan with lower limb amputation. If you're not familiar with this, because of the care that our service members were receiving in combat and back in the local hospitals, and the ability to get our service members back to the United States in less than a week after having a traumatic amputation in combat, they had a higher expected rate of return to duty following traumatic amputation, and as well as they were receiving like the best rehabilitative care they could receive in world-class care and world-class facilities in both San Diego and San Antonio and in Washington, D.C. So the problem was that there weren't tests out there to assess their high-level mobility capabilities. So we developed a test called the CHAMP. This is our publication from 2013. It was a single topic issue in JRD. So the CHAMP contains several tests within the CHAMP single stance, sidestep test, or 4-meter sidestep test. We'll talk about that, as well as a T test, and we convert that to an L test. I'll talk about that as well, and the Illinois agility test. So we developed this test to assess high-level mobility capabilities for our service members and veterans with lower limb loss who want to return back to duty. So with this in mind, I figured we developed this test. It only makes sense if we can use this type of test with our athletes at the University of Miami to help help establish like reference range values, just in case someone happens to get injured during the season. We know where they were at their preseason healthy performance, so we know where they need to get to in order to return back to sport safely. So we've collected CHAMP data, or in this case, it's CHAMP-S data for many years, and established reference range values for not only football, but multiple sports, whether it's women's soccer, women's volleyball, women's basketball, men's basketball, in addition to men's football. So we established these reference range values by position for an athlete if they happen to undergo or have a lower extremity injury that results in surgery or keeps them out of playing time for a significant period of time and they require rehab. We know what they need to be able to get to in order to return back to sports safely. So we have this test, right, called the CHAMP, and we have this sensor system now that we're using with amputees. It's like, all right, how can we use this sensor system during the CHAMP, and can we develop specific sensor metrics that might be indicative of maybe risk of injury, or if we can. And what we found, which was really important, was that there are movements that as a clinician you may see someone move or perform an activity, and you may in your heart, in your gut, you say, that person's just not moving as efficient as they should. And if you just give them a time-based test, like maybe one of the CHAMP tests, like the T test or the L test or the Illinois test, they may be performing at a level that they need to in order to return back to sport, but their quality isn't what it should be, and it's something that you can't quantify, that you see with your eyes, but you currently don't have any way to quantify those types of micro impairments or micro instabilities during movement, or micro inefficiencies during high speed movement. So what we decided to do was utilize our sensor system, our reload system with our athletes, call it cane sense, and we've developed specific sensor metrics with two of the tests that have been very powerful in identifying risk of injury. And now we've been utilizing it as well throughout the rehab process to assess improvements in specific metrics. So in addition to this type of cane sense, we work along with strength and conditioning and our rehab teams in order to implement like a continuous method of testing throughout the season, so we can assess them prior to strength and conditioning program, beginning their strength and conditioning programs to throughout to right before preseason, so we can identify them all throughout those stages of training to see if anyone is potentially at risk for injury. And it's the same system that we used prior. In this case, you just put on the 2 knee sleeves. They communicate the same way. In this case, we're generating reports as well, so that we can share with the clinicians and patients, as well as a web portal similar to what we had in Reload. So the 2 sensor metrics that we've actually established and published on are called regional limb stability, which is assessed during single limb stance. It looks at knee excursion of the thigh and shank segments in the anterior, posterior, and medial lateral directions during the single limb stance, and that's one metric that we've been able to establish. And then another is called transitional angular displacement segments, and it quantifies knee joint motion during loading and unloading during changing of directions while they're performing the 4-meter sidestep test. I had videos, but I couldn't use them because Zoom just doesn't work well with videos. At least not my Zoom doesn't work well with videos. So they typically stand on one limb. Okay, as you can see, it's this gentleman here to the left. We collect data on an iPad, so everything's streamed in real time. And below, you can kind of see like the data that we're collecting. We're collecting data, how much excursion is occurring at the thigh and shank throughout the entire 30 seconds. And then they get, we quantify their excursions, and then they get a score. They get a roll score for the left and right leg. And then we look at the symmetry between limbs, and that's been extremely powerful in identifying risk for injury. And I'll talk about that in a couple of slides. The next metric, like I discussed, is called TADS. TADS looks at the amount of time spent on each limb during loading and unloading, and the angular velocity that's occurring at the knee during loading and unloading as well. As you can see in these kind of like wavy lines, we've identified both the left and right limb. So what's occurring, how much are they loading and unloading? And as you can see, every little like curve every flexion extension curve that's occurring in this wave graph, that's where they're having a change of direction. So what we do is we capture the total amount of movement throughout the loading and unloading, and we calculate a TADS value for both the left and right limb. And then we also look at symmetry between limbs as well. And then lastly, we generate a report that the physical therapists can share with the strength and conditioning coach and share with the coaches as well. It's been a revelation of how, first of all, like to even take a step back. And I didn't really get a chance to talk about this because I'm talking really fast, and I apologize. But I think we've been really lucky. And it kind of goes back to that first slide in terms of collaboration. We've been really lucky that we've been able to collaborate with orthopedics and sports medicine and the athletics department at the University of Miami. That is not the case in every major university. That is not. It's hard to get your foot in the door in athletics at your university if where you work. It's difficult at times to do that. We had a lot of advocates who knew our research, they knew the potential of it. We were able to get the opportunity to show people what we had the capabilities of doing, and they believed in us, and they allowed us to utilize, implement this type of serial outcome measure testing with the intention to help them identify risk for injury. And that's what we did. Actually, we published these results. 2020 was a good year for us in terms of publications. And we published this in Medicine, Science, and Sports and Exercise. We were able to we established the Rolls Symmetry Index, has like a good diagnostic accuracy in identifying someone who's going to be at risk for injury that's going to result in surgery. So if someone scores a specific symmetry value prior, at a preseason level when they're supposed to be healthy, we know that if they score a specific number, they're at a significant risk of having a lower limb injury resulting in surgery. As you can see here, these values, our Rolls diagnostic accuracy was 92% accurate in classifying the injury. Rate of injury with Rolls, if Rolls is really low, typically around the 60th and 50th percentile, they're at a high risk for injury. It has high specificity, and its miscalculation rate is typically quite low. So Rolls was able to identify a low risk for lower limb injury, and as well, in terms of, we also are able to use it not only for lower limb injury but for post-concussion assessment. And we found that it's typically post-concussion Rolls values decrease significantly, and it kind of behaves very much like how someone would present with a stroke. It's contralateral if they're if they're hit on the left side of their head, their right side stability was typically very, very high. So it was, and the effect size is gigantic. So and it's a lot more sensitive than other outcome measures that are out there. We tested against the best, so we were able to use this kind of like as a return to play metric to help with guiding return to play decision making post concussion. And this is just one more little graph I want to show that we've been implementing our Rolls and TAS values along with strength and conditioning programs, along with like working with strength and conditioning at the University of Miami. So if we will implement like a dynamic warm-up program for athletes that really performed very low. As you can see, like their Rolls SI values were horrible, 42% between limbs. It's really bad. And they were moving relatively fast on the sidestepping, and their TAS values were very low as well. And as you can see, about 7 months post strength and conditioning interventions with the team, they had significant improvements in their stability, in their loading and unloading of their limb, as well as improvements in their speed of movement. So that's excellent. And the last thing I kind of want to talk about is we're implementing this program with the 82nd Airborne in Fort Bragg at Royal Mac Army Medical Center. We're expecting to launch this program in the next month or so. So we're really happy about that. And the goal is to be able to implement Rolls and TADs as well during airborne initiation when our service members come into Fort Bragg. When they initially, we'll do this testing and track them for a year and see if they happen to have a lower limb injury. We'll collect that data, and then we'll be able to correlate how their like healthy Rolls and TADs values, how that was related to their Rolls and TADs values and how that relates to injury. So that is starting very soon. I think the big thing that I want to stress is that collaboration really is key, and this is a true team effort. All these people, all these institutions really have made our research and our programs a significant success. And if I were to give you any advice, anyone here who's like an assistant professor, or someone trying to find their way in terms of research wise, try to find a partner. Try to connect with someone in orthopedics and sports medicine and athletics, biomedical engineering. Just start a friendship, and try to see how you can collaborate with different departments in your university and in your military institutions. I think it's been essential to our labs' success and growth, our continued success and growth. And we're extremely grateful and blessed for that. So here's some more media. I'll probably send Debbie a copy of this, so if you're interested in looking at some more articles, you can, as well as our publications. So thank you so much for your time. I'm here to answer questions now. So I'm going to stop sharing, and thank you. So fire away.
Thank you all very much. You can either type your questions in the chat or raise your hand or speak up. We've used to having everything done. We have some questions that were submitted earlier as well, so we can go with.
I can start with those if you want, just to get break the ice. I'm not gonna lie to you. There's some questions here I can't answer. Okay, I can't answer. I'm gonna do my best. So first, could you compare the advantages and disadvantages of using standalone wearable sensors versus using sensors in smartphones paired with an app? I think I'll tell you this, and it's just kind of answering that question, but not really. I think there's a significant benefit if you can. Look, let me take a step back. It all depends, like using sensors, it all depends on kind of like what you want to capture. Okay, I think that's really important. There's a significant advantage to our system in using multiple sensors to assess what we want to assess, which was gait, right, initially, and balance, and changing directions or quality of changing directions. I can tell you that we did some pilot testing with just using like one sensor, which a lot of companies typically like they'll promote a system that just you put one sensor on your lower back or on your thoracic region, and they say, okay, that can help to assess, you know, overall stability of the lower limbs or identify risk for injury. But I mean, what we found with some of the publications some of the research that we published was that using multiple sensors on lower limbs was more sensitive to identifying the presentation of an impairment compared to just using one sensor. Now, using sensors on smartphones and pairing with an app, I think it kind of goes back to what you want to really assess. I think for the typical clinician, there are platforms that allow you to access your patient's like data on their phone, whether in terms of steps or general activity. I think there are platforms that allow you to do that. Like Fitbit is one platform. They have a Fitabase. I think Fitabase is their database that allows you to go and log in and see how active your patient is or isn't. So those are things that are out there currently. So I hope I answered that question. Let me see what else. How good are currently available products at identifying risk for injury? You put falls risk. I don't know, but I can tell you about our products in terms of we've been, so you know, reload system, we don't ask the patient to wear reload all the time, okay? We have them put it on a concentrated time when they go for a walk at home and when they're gonna do their exercises. We've contemplated the idea of having them wear the system the entire time. It's just you always are at risk that they may get sick of having to put the system on, wear it all day long. So that might affect long-term usability of the system. If I'm asking someone to put like a sleeves on and things of that nature. But if we're asking them to do it over a concentrated period of time, at least from our research, it was more digestible for them to do. What else? Is it possible for a non-programmer to access sensors in a smartphone? Again, I think there are definitely platforms that you can access. I'm unaware of them. I just know that there are platforms. I've seen presentations at CSM that have discussed different platforms that clinicians can use. Do you assess the athlete's military personnel while fatigued? That's a good question. All right, so what we typically do is we have them go through like a dynamic warm-up program prior to administering our roles and TADs. That's how we've done it. Now I think there's a significant benefit to assessing this potentially like prior to and post like a workout. It's not realistic to do it like in a game time or practice setting. Like it's a fine line, at least from our experience, of how much you can Like you don't want to push too much in terms of like integration. You want to be able to do as much as you can within your lane, if that makes sense. So, but I think there are avenues where we could do that. Whether it's during their like preseason summer training programs, we could potentially implement our sensor system, our Keen Sense, pre and post workouts. Can you talk about the work that has been done in translation of technology to other populations? Look, so this sensor system, so we went from we developed it for lower limb amputees. So from lower limb amputees, we were able to translate it to working with athletes, both with lower limb injury and post-concussion. Now we're collaborating with different institutes to look at the effects of mild cognitive impairment and the changes in these sensor metrics throughout interventions or longitudinally for patients with mild cognitive impairment. That's one group that we're currently working with. I think there's definitely a benefit, and we're currently looking at dual task performance and changes in gait metrics for patients who are at risk for falls, who are diagnosed with, as with frailty as well as with mild cognitive impairment. So we are currently doing that. Dr. Kirk Sanchez is actually leading that project currently right now. Okay. Have you or will you assess reload with other patient populations? One of the ones, okay, you said post-CVA. The one, and I'm not going to go that way right now. I think what the potential right now for this, for our sensor system is really like post-hip replacement, post-knee replacement in the VA system. I can guarantee that's a population that would definitely benefit from both assessing their gait metrics at home and then getting real-time feedback in order to improve their balance, their gait symmetry while walking. I think that's a huge opportunity for us to implement or to deploy this system with a population that could potentially benefit from this in a big way, and it can help a lot of people as well. What else? And have you compared gait metrics you measure with those collected by iPhones? Oh, we haven't compared, but you know what, to be honest with you, that's a brilliant idea. And we're collecting this data. Look, with the iPads, it was always, we didn't have that functionality turned on when we gave our veterans with lower limb loss iPads to take home with them and use a reload system. But now we're using iTouches. iTouches have that capability. So that's like, Andrew, that's a great idea. That's a research project right there. I'm pumped now. So we're definitely going to look at that. Thank you. That's a great idea. Oh, yeah, that's a good, thank you, Dr. Kirk Sanchez, for mentioning that. So I couldn't talk about all our sensor metrics that we've collected, but we've actually established a couple other sensor metrics that look at symmetry and repeatability of the specific of the lower limb segments. Dr. Clemens, Sheila Clemens out of FIU, she's one of our graduates here at the University of Miami. She did her PhD here. She actually helped establish these sensor metrics, looking at how symmetrical the thigh and thigh are moving when you're comparing limb to limb, shank and shank, as well as like the repeatability of the limb, like repeatability of the same limb while moving. So we looked at symmetry between limbs and repeatability within limbs. And I think that's for patients who have like joint replacements, stroke, even like I would say like even like post ACL surgery. It's to be able to see how they change in terms of their symmetry of gait movement when they're able to achieve symmetrical gait. Like these metrics, I think, provide something different than your standard stance time, step length, because I think it gives you an idea of their overall quality of movement and efficiency of movement. And we're actually looking at implementing that with some of our high-speed movements currently right now as well. So
let's pause and let, I think Beth Brown has a question along these lines. Iggy, you're so excited.
Yeah, I'm kind of one of those ask your question out loud people. So
Yeah.
great talk, Ignacio, and you made me so proud of my alma mater because I graduated from the UW PT program a long time ago. So really great talk. I have a question about the technology application to upper extremity. All have you played around with putting the sensors on throwing athletes or upper extremity amputees at any of that yet?
You know, that's like it's in the docket. We started that project, and it's just it's one of those topics that we want to address. We've collected data. Like, we're lucky that we have a really excellent Julian Rivera, who's at the University of Miami. He's a head of rehab for our baseball program. He implements a cadre of outcome measures, and he uses all these outcome measures and these sensor technologies, like develop like almost a prescription, an individualized prescription-based program for each baseball player by position. It's pretty impressive. And we've been talking about implementing some of our sensor technology, but again, it's to be honest with you, a lot of it has to do with bandwidth. So we're lucky enough that we have the team that we have to help like develop and work with the populations we're currently working with. I think it's a matter, you know, it would be great to get a couple more engineers to help us expand in that direction. But we've talked about it so many times. We've met with Dr. Kaplan, who's the head physician for the Miami Marlins. So that's always a topic of conversation. It's just a matter of bandwidth, to be honest.
That's neat. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Neva, you want to go next?
I just wanted to comment on Beth's question that the other, I think the head of our spinal cord model systems unit also was really interested in upper extremity sensors for to look at some shoulder disability, shoulder impairments with wheelchair propulsion, and also for balance, sitting balance and spinal cord injury. So he was very, very interested in that. I think though the answer was the same, like we need more engineers and more programmers in order to get that work done.
And I'll tell you, to add to that, it's been, when we began working with both programmers and engineers, like, we're speaking two different languages, and they need, number one, they need to learn the PT rehab language in terms of like they're experts now in gait, and we have to become like really familiar, and we have to really feel comfortable with all the different technologies, the machine learning classification, all the IMU technologies, so that we can speak the same language in order to achieve a unified goal. And it took a while. It was fun initially to do that. Some of those conversations, it's like, what is knee flexion again? What is terms of what are you assessing here? And then, like, what's a GUI? I had no idea what a GUI was. And that, so it's like it's been an amazing experience learning from each other, but it takes patience, and it takes a willingness to find someone who's willing to do that. And there are people, I promise you, in each academic institution, there are people who are chomping at the bit to collaborate. It's a matter of just, it's like baby steps, little projects here and there, just to get the creative juices flowing and just to accomplish something. I think that's always like the baby steps will get you to your ultimate goal, I don't see any more questions. So, but if anyone else has any other questions, not, thank you. Thank you so much. This has been awesome. It's been a cool experience, and thank you all for taking the time on an evening to listen to me talk for a little bit about our research.
Thank you. I guess my one question is commercial availability of Reload. Where's that going?
Right. So we're currently, that second MDORP expansion initiative is that's the direction we're currently going in with Reload.
Mhm.
Made sense. The Culture Award, again, Wallace Culture Award, for translational research, different institutions have, I think, that funding mechanism, and they are supporting us and helping to commercialize Pain Sense for us. So it's been a process. It's been an interesting and fun process, but I mean, I think the majority of these large institutions have these mechanisms that allow you to kind of help develop, because it makes sense. It makes sense for them to help get this technology out, and helps everyone be successful.
Yep. Well, thank you. That was great. And like I said, this will be, this is recorded and it will be available for viewing in the future. Takes us, as I said, a couple of weeks to get this done, but we really appreciate the sharing, and come back in a month on the 19th of April and listen to Dr. Sousa talk about activity monitoring. So part 2. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you all.